I was raised in a very small town which is 44 kilometers outside Harare, the capital city of Zimbabwe. Going west, it's called Norton, and I might be, maybe, I don't know well the history, but I could be the first female poet who is very active about poetry and who takes poetry as a profession. Um, and the majority of my work really is being a voice for the voiceless. My stories are about celebrating womanhood and bringing out the plight of women. And when I say that, it means everything that goes on around in the world of women. So it includes the male partners as well. So because we are not an island where women live on their own. So all these things I talk about in my work, it's more everyday life, but on a very like sad, depressing note, where issues to do with gender-based violence, issues to do with sexual abuse, issues to do with young girls not affording an education, issues to do with sex work, issues to do with human rights. So a lot of my work is very touching. I know on some instances I've made one or two people cry in my performances. So that's a lot of the work that I deal with, but I try to tell these stories from my own perspective. So there's always an element of truth in my work, or an experience that I've seen, that I've observed, or that I've also gone through, where if I see my neighbor being beaten by a husband, I've lived the experience. And it is in that moment that I'm supposed to write about that. So a lot of my work, at some point, you might experience that. For instance, early last year, there was a woman in one of the towns called Chitungweza who murdered her husband. And this, in one of my works, you realize I also have a poem of a woman who reflects on her life while she's in prison, and she had murdered her husband. And the story is more similar. This woman murders her husband, but you have to look into what would have caused that to happen. So that's what my work is about. And I'm at a point with my work now where it has to be about conversations. I'm not happy with just performing and leaving the stage. I'm happy now to have a performance and to engage with the work. So for instance, if you're living in Canada and I perform, we have to have a conversation about our realities. Stuff happening in my poetry, does this also happen to you? But if we just come and I perform and I leave the stage, I feel empty after the performance. I want people to have conversations around my work. I want to be able to answer some questions. Why did you write this poem? What inspired it? How come A, B, C, D in your poem? At that point, I think that's where my work has more value or depth, when we can actually engage with the work. Because personally, I've been to poetry performances and I've always left wondering, what if I had a chance to speak with the poet to understand how they wrote that poem, or what made them write the poem, or what were they going through. And most times I always feel there is something lacking. And so for me, what I'm designing now is a chance for conversation. So whenever I perform now, I'm very open to be having a conversation about my work. Hence, I've been designing what I call performance lectures, where I perform for university students and they get to engage with my work, whether from performance studies, gender and sexuality studies, women studies, human rights, psychology, sociology. I think even public health, somebody should find a space for them to fit into my work. If you're a feminist, how do you approach my work? If you're a theater student, how do you engage with my work? If you're dealing with human rights, and I'm talking about sex workers, how do you? So I think I'm at a point where I'm very comfortable with different people from different faculties engaging with my poetry. So my tour is starting on the 11th of May up to the 9th of August. So if you're in Europe, I got a Schengen visa which allows me to be in 26 countries. So all you need to do is you book me up for a gig, a performance lecture at your university, or a workshop with some of your students. I'm very open to doing that. I'm very also open for collaborations. So if you've been looking for an African poet to collaborate with, I'm your go-to. But also if you're home, you have to be watching, you have to be following me. I need you to keep updated at what am I doing, what's new, what's cooking. So these are some of the things that you should look forward to from this tour, but also look out for my other collaborations that I'll be working with. I'll be working with a dancer, and I'm gonna do my EPK whilst I'm in Europe, and there'll be lots of videos that I'll be sharing and lots of poetry to be made during this tour.